Hello, I am back to make another video. Maybe it was like a month or so ago. I was reading my Bible, and I think I was probably reading like Matthew or something, and I was just like reading, because the Pharisees, if you read the Bible, the Pharisees come up a lot. And I think there was a part with them, and it like struck me. I was literally like, okay, a lot of the ways that the Pharisees were in the Bible reminds me so much of like the modern day liberal in our society right now. And that's not to be like condemning of them or whatever. And that's not to say it's every single one. But a lot of the ideology of the left and the way that they act is so, I was like, oh my gosh, they're literally like the modern day Pharisee. And I was just thinking about that. And like, maybe there's like a spirit of the Pharisees, or a Pharisee, definitely a critical spirit kind of attached to a lot of the liberal ideology and agenda. Because like one thing I notice a lot about, a lot of leftists, especially the ones that are like very crazy, very extreme, but honestly, I feel like it's the whole ideology. It's like they'll nitpick one thing. They'll get really mad. They'll get really enraged about like one small, minute thing, but then completely ignore a huge thing. For instance, obviously the Charlie Kirk assassination has been in the news quite a bit, and a lot of people are talking about it, which is good. I think people should talk about it because it's affected a lot of people. But like one thing I noticed is so many people were upset about Jimmy Kimmel getting fired. Because why are we upset about somebody getting fired? A business is allowed to fire an employee if, number one, they don't want them working for them anymore. And also, he straight up lied on his show about who the shooter was. Let's just put that out there. He lied about it. It is, yeah, we're not going to go into that. However, I just noticed like a lot of, and I'm going to speak more to like the Christians, I guess. A lot of Christians with like that more liberal mindset, progressive Christians, they were like, oh my gosh, this is like a loss of free speech. They were just really focusing on that. But it's like not a word said about the fact that a man was quite literally murdered for free speech. I just don't understand. It makes no sense in my mind. And it just honestly reminds me of the Pharisees in the Bible when you read about them. And like one example that I was just reading just now was Jesus talking about the Sabbath and how he healed somebody on the Sabbath. And the Pharisees were like so up in arms about the fact that he healed somebody on the Sabbath, because it's like, in the Bible it says the Sabbath is a day of rest, don't do any work, all those things. And the thing about the Pharisees, I guess if you don't know, which I should have explained probably, was that they were like the spiritual leaders of the Jews at the time. So this was like the Roman Empire when Jesus came to the earth. And the Pharisees were the spiritual leaders. They knew the law. They were basically kind of like, they just knew their stuff, and I think people were probably intimidated by them. They looked up to them. They revered them. However, the Pharisees were more so, they looked good on the outside, right? Like they knew the prayers to pray. They knew all the rules to follow. They knew this and that. However, like Jesus literally called them, I believe he called them whitewashed tombs. Basically, they look so nice on the outside, but they're dead and rotting on the inside. Like that's intense, So it's like maybe their ideology seemed loving, seemed compassionate, seemed like the way to go, and people looked up to them. However, they were literally just hypocrites. Jesus called them hypocrites. And I feel like, unfortunately, that's what I see a lot in today with the liberal left, especially liberal. I don't know how you can be a liberal Christian. I'm sorry. I'm going to just say that. I see that in so many people I know that say they're Christians, but yet they are pretty left leaning. Hopefully not in every way, because yeah, but I notice that they tend to be a lot more left leaning. It just seems like they act like hypocrites a lot of the time, like, sorry, I'm not trying to be not trying to start an argument or be divisive or whatever, but it's like they're just waiting there, just standing there at the sidelines. I'm not talking about anyone specific, I'm saying in general. They're just like waiting to find one little thing to trip somebody up on, whether it be conservatives, whether it be, you know, our president right now, whether it be just anyone who I guess is kind of conservative, or just like in life in general. It's like they're waiting for them to trip up to find that one small thing they can condemn them on. When it's like, I'm sorry, you took that out of all of the good that they were doing. You took that one thing. For instance, I saw a lot of, not a lot, but a few people talk about how like Charlie Kirk was aggressive with the way that he spoke and the way that he debated. I'm just like, really? Like, that's what you took out of his whole life, his whole ministry? That's the one thing that you took away from that? Like, that is so odd to me. And then I was thinking about that yesterday, and I was just thinking like, what did Jesus sound like when he was talking to people? You know, back when he was like on the earth, literally, you know, as Jesus in the human form. I was like, what do we expect him to sound like? Was he always like, I'm sure he didn't always talk like, oh, you know, like to the Pharisees, oh, you whitewashed tombs. Are you kidding me? He probably sounded so aggressive, so mean. We'd probably look back at him nowadays and be like, you need to be more loving, more kind, more compassionate. I just think that's so ridiculous. That's such a weird take to focus on that one small thing of maybe sometimes he was aggressive. Okay. At least he was out there. At least he was getting out there, bringing God's truth to people, trying to help save lives, you know, save the trajectory of young people from going down a bad path, which is what the world and culture is pushing. Like, I'm sorry. That's the one thing that you're going to focus on. See what I mean? It just reminds me so much of the Pharisees. And like, I'm not sitting here and I'm not trying to be like, oh, you're a Pharisee, you're a Pharisee, you're a Pharisee. Because, girl, I know that I have been like that as well in my own life. I have been very critical. I sometimes struggle with a critical spirit as well. But I'm like, that's the thing, is like, God reveals that to you so you can work through it, so you can be cleansed of your pride, of your self-righteousness. But I'm just saying, I was just thinking about that and just thinking like, oh my gosh, so many people who, you know, and I'm not here to be like, to dog on people necessarily. I'm just saying like the ideology of leftism and what a lot of, you know, of like being a liberal and stuff. It's so self-righteous. It's so full of pride, and it's wild to me because, you know, you'll get on social media, you'll see people talking about how I'm so glad Charlie Kirk was murdered. Like, he was a fascist, he was a Nazi. I'm like, do you realize how self-righteous you sound right now? You're getting so upset, first of all, about something that's not even true, nitpicking little things about him, taking little, you know, watching little tiny sound bites edited to look a certain way. You're literally nitpicking. That's what you're doing. You're nitpicking, but then you're turning around and you're celebrating the fact that he was murdered. I'm sorry. There's something really wrong with that kind of ideology. And I'm not saying that I've seen any Christians, liberal Christians that I know, celebrating. Well, actually I have on social media. Not anyone that I know personally. Nobody that I know personally. That's kind of like more of a liberal Christian. And no hate to you. Like, I love you. This is, you know, maybe this will help you. I don't know. But anyway, just so many of them, it's like they nitpick on one small little thing that they didn't like, while completely ignoring the big picture, the good that happened, or the absolute evil that we should condemn. And that's the other thing kind of that ties into this too, that I've been thinking a lot about, is love. And obviously love is so many people think about love, but just thinking that in terms of like our culture and, you know, how love has been so twisted. Basically, to so many people, love equals hate and hate equals love. Like, they're twisting, you know, people getting up in arms the fact that maybe Charlie Kirk was aggressive with his tone, which is so weird to me, when in reality, he was out there loving people. He was bringing them the truth. Like, I don't know when we got so weird about what love means, but love is not being like soft and never saying anything because you don't want to offend people. You know, I was thinking about it this morning and this phrase popped into my head of, I would rather offend people with the truth and bring them the truth than hold their hand on the way to hell. You know? And that's the thing, is our culture is getting so much more dark with every passing day, and obviously we know why. You know, the world is just going to become more dark until Jesus comes back. But that's the thing, the darker the world and the culture is, the more aggressive and offensive the truth is going to seem to them. You know? And so that's just like, that ties into like the whole Pharisee thing. You know, when you speak the truth, Jesus spoke the truth. He lived his life literally perfect, first of all, which no one else can do or has ever done since or will do. But even Jesus, even people found fault with him and were criticizing and nitpicking, you know? So I guess my point here is, so much of the liberal ideology, like I've said, comes across to me as it's tied up in a lot of self-righteousness, a lot of pride, quite literally a critical spirit, a Pharisee spirit. But I'm here to tell you, like, reject that ideology. It's destructive. It's destructive to your soul. It's destructive to your mind. It's destructive to your life in every single way. Reject it. You know, the Bible says God rejects the proud but gives grace to the humble. You know, like, reject it. Humble yourself for the Lord. Humble yourself for the Lord. Reject those evil ideologies. And like, I'm not going to sit here and say, and your life will be perfect and it will be yada yada. But honestly, like, it will be so much better. You know, God says to live our lives a certain way for a reason, because he knows what happens if we don't. He sees the negative effects it has. He sees the long-term effects that we can't even see ourselves. He sees our very soul. He sees our very spirit, our mind. He sees every inch of us. Everybody. Even if you don't believe in him, he does, because he's real no matter what, you know? So hopefully I articulated my thoughts in a way that made sense. And yeah, let me know what you think, because I don't think I've really ever heard many people talk about this.